So, how long have you been doing TikTok?
I've been on TikTok for 9 months now.
Okay, okay. It seems like you've had a very substantial amount of success.
Yes.
Has it been interesting for you? Like, has it had any kind of weird existential texture? Like, do you feel different now? Or,
So it's definitely before I was on TikTok was very much more closed-minded and unawares of the changes happening in technology surrounding social media and just digital marketing in general.
okay,
And now I'm very much aware of kind of the most forefront things that are happening technology-wise in like e-commerce and social media and just anything digital. Um, so that's probably the biggest change. I don't feel different in terms of like, ooh, now I'm famous or something. Like I don't know. I guess I always see myself as famous in my own head. So like everyone else is just catching up.
yeah, I kind of vibe with what you're saying there. So, have you done a lot of digital marketing before you had been on TikTok?
Yeah, so I've been doing it for 10 years now. I've had my own businesses for 8 years. First, I had a product-based business that was a smoking accessory. Then I had a sticker printing, t-shirt making, and graphic design business that I did for a bit, and before I got into glass blowing. And then I've been
Okay,
doing glass blowing for 5 years now. And through all of those businesses, have gotten not all of the sales, sorry, 80+% of sales through digital marketing. We do also do trade shows. So that's where like the other 20% comes from.
okay, that's really cool. Do you do any kind of like Ren fairs or anything with that, like that with the glass blowing business?
No, just because the amount of money that you can make, you'd have to be really, really smart about specifically making pieces for that event to be able to sell more than just stocking up for a trade show. And to be
Okay.
honest, the trade shows are a lot more fun because they're all held in like Vegas or like Chicago. Like they're held in super fun places and they put on like extra events and everyone goes to them. So it's really cool as an artist to get to go and see like 1,000 other artists work and they're all different and you get to talk to I love the trade show environment.
Okay, that's really cool. Uh, Now, you had mentioned find your audience, find your voice, find your rhythm. Are there any specifics that you kind of want to talk about in the interview on that front?
um no, I think it really kind of goes into every aspect, um, that no matter what your business is or where you're starting out, whether you're like really small or whether you're really big, that you can better understand your audience, that none of us are the audience, and therefore we can always do a better job kind of connecting with the audience. And that's kind of like the heart of my digital marketing philosophy, so to speak.
Okay, okay. I really vibe well with that. All right. Are you ready to get started?
I am.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to take us in, then we will do the interview. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. The whole kind of vibe and bent for this is just having an organic conversation and trying to take away some actionable steps for small businesses.
Awesome.
So, all right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again today on The Beacons. I'm your finance host, Matthew Profit, and I'm here today with TikTok star and digital marketing expert, Maayan Gordon. Maayan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. I have been in the digital marketing space for about 10 years now. I got into the field through copywriting, and that's always been kind of at the core of my digital marketing strategies is, crafting really well structured and thought out communications between a brand and the customer or, the target audience. I've had my own businesses for the past 8 years, from a product-based business where we sold on our own website and Amazon to more of a service-based business where we did graphic design and sticker printing, into glass blowing, which I've been doing for the past 5 years. And then most recently in the past 9 months, had a lot of success on TikTok and then hopped onto LinkedIn as well and been sharing kind of everything I've learned in the process on LinkedIn.
That's awesome. What was it like starting out as a copywriter? right around 10 years ago. I myself started doing copywriting about 5 years ago, and it's been interesting seeing the progression in the disruptive tech niche. Where did you start out?
Yeah, so I think I've always been really fortunate in my life to have great timing with most of the things that I've jumped into. Like I feel I'm a fortunate age to be in this cross between. I'm 28 for those of you who wanted to guess. So I was born right before technology was really getting crazy. Like we had VHS sets and like Walkmans, like before DVD. I remember before Game Boy regular came out, and then I remember when Game Boy Color came out and like how exciting it all used to be. And now everything's like digital and like
Yeah,
technology can do so many things. So I feel I'm very fortunate to have that perspective. At the same time, I think um, you know copywriting has been something I've been good at naturally because I went to schools that really taught me how to write well, and forced me to write a lot, like very, very often. I think writing is absolutely one of those skills that the more you practice, the better you get, just like playing an instrument. And I realized when I started copywriting, and the reason I got into it was I just needed to earn some extra money while I was in college. I was in college and I had no money. I had like a summer internship job in the lab that I was, because I was getting a chemistry degree.
okay.
And so I had like a summer job, but then during the rest of the year I had nothing. And I had to like, buy stuff. I was a young kid out in the world. Um, and so I was just looking up all the different jobs on Craigslist, and I was looking up how do you make money online and just doing all these different research things. And I stumbled upon the writing section in, the Craigslist gigs in the job section. And I just started messaging people, and I had good writing samples from high school. Things that, again, luckily I went to a high school where some of the writing was like business related, or it made sense in the real world. It wasn't like a report on a textbook or something like that. And so I had these good writing samples. I sent them out, and I immediately started getting people back being like, "You have great writing. Like I'd love to hire you." And I was like, "What? This is crazy." And then when I actually started doing the work, I saw how easy it was compared to essay writing. Like essay writing is one of the hardest types of writing that exists. I've done script writing before, which is actually really, really fun.
It
Um,
is.
yeah, because you're using very few words and accomplishing a lot, and you're also doing some level of directing within the writing because of like you're saying how the scenes are shot into and things like that. It's really fun. But even just writing copy for emails, I think it's really fun to write an email to people and trying to think about what words to use to get them engaged. So I fell in love with copywriting right away when I saw that it was different than essay writing, and like
Mhm.
the ways that it connects people, and it can be really be used in all sorts of different formats. And it's been at the core of, I think, my success with a lot of my digital marketing, especially with social media, because that text, that caption, that part of the post is really important.
I couldn't agree more. It's really got to be a knockout punch pretty much every time that you're sending something out on social if you want to stay on voice for your brand. And you're right. Email copywriting is probably one of the most fun types of copywriting there is. Because you have a lot of the time few words, some images, maybe some videos that you can share inside of it, and you've got to know what your audience wants, what their day to day looks like, what their struggles are, how you can help them, or how you can entertain them. And a lot of the time, especially in business writing, people forget to entertain their audience. And I just had a call right before this. I was talking to a video marketing and LinkedIn lead generation guy, and we got on that exact same topic. How can content entertain people and solve a problem? Because if you can do
Yeah,
both, that's the holy grail, right?
I talk about that a lot. Like when you get to a certain level of business, and or even just today in the world when there's so many options when it comes to almost anything, if two things are relatively the same, you're going to pick the one that's more fun or that's more interesting or more entertaining. Because why would you pick the boring one or the least interesting one? Like there's just no reason to.
There's not. You're 100% right. So, are there any really quick, just actionable tips that you can give the businesses who may be listening to this to help find their audience and find their voice?
Yeah, ask more questions. I think asking questions in your copy is such an excellent way. not only to see who's connecting with your wording, because if you ask a question and people don't respond, that's like a baseline right there of telling you the way you worded it, the way you're communicating right now is not engaging enough for people. If they are responding, then you'll start to see which parts of the question or the message they're really responding to, and you can start to like shift and adapt your writing style to match that.
That's 100% accurate. And between asking more questions and really homing in on the headlines that resonate with people so they
Yes.
open it to begin with, I think in my career and my experience with selling newsletters that sell rather,
Yes.
those are the two most important parts, because if they don't pay attention to the headline, you never get the chance to convert them. And if you don't ask the questions, you never learn how they interact with your content.
Which is why email marketing can be such a good research tool, even for like getting information and then applying it to, let's say, your LinkedIn or your any of your accounts, where in every social media platform, when you're scrolling, they're showing you the top 1 or 2 lines of what you're writing, and that's the headline, and you have to capture people's attention. Now in a LinkedIn post by itself, you can't really tell how many people specifically sorry, my dog's coming in the
It's
picture.
okay.
Specifically are like paying attention to the headline, or that it's mattering to them enough to read the rest of the post.
Mhm.
Versus an email, you get that direct, did they open it? Did they open it is based on the headline or the subject, they call it in the email, exclusively. And so that really gives you great info of like, okay, these are better headlines for me to use, not only in my email marketing, but also in my LinkedIn posts or in my Instagram posts.
That's exactly right. Having just that one slight difference in where the stats are being measured, the before the first two lines of the post, just that headline, and then that first two lines of the post and the headline, that makes so much difference in terms
Yeah.
of what you learn from it. Are there any things that you really pay close attention to, either on LinkedIn or on TikTok? I imagine you probably have had a good bit of selling success through TikTok with your channel, World of Glass.
Yeah, so right now I'm in quite a bit of a pause mode on my glass blowing business,
Mhm.
as I am shifting from a business model where I found a demand and I was meeting a demand, or like a market opportunity.
Mhm.
So that was smoking accessories. So as marijuana has been legalized, more and more people have wanted to purchase, let's say, nice glass pipes, because it's
Right.
something, instead of hiding, they want to actually show it off to their friends and be like, look, did you know pipes could be like artwork? And people are like, what? That's crazy. Um, and so as that's grown, there's been a constant opportunity for anyone who's a glassblower to make and sell pipes and smoking related pieces. But
Right.
I now have a new opportunity that most people don't have, in which I have a completely different audience that's very interested in glass, that
Mhm.
I have across multiple platforms, and that I can actually craft a complete brand strategy around this new audience, or even use the new audience to leverage and target a completely different audience I don't have access to, but that is the ideal audience for me to create the brand I ideally want to create. So like, I think that's a crazy cool opportunity that I get to create a brand based on how I want it to be, in combination, of course, like with market analysis and
Right.
like, thinking about customers and how what they want. But I think there's a big difference between that and just seeing an opportunity and making the things based on the opportunity. And so I'm trying to make that shift, and it requires, I think, a lot more planning, a lot more thought on, on copywriting. So because I'm good at copywriting, I can fall into the trap of not planning any of it out or having any strategy behind it, because I can just produce it and it's great and people respond to it. But again, to take it to the next level of business, where I'm I've got, a brand that's really quickly and easily and globally recognized, that requires strategy. That's not like an accidental thing that people achieve. And so I'm trying to make that transition currently.
One thing that I really like, one quote that has really stuck with me the entire time I've been copywriting that resonates on that front. I believe it was Thomas Edison said, um, "Nobody wants true success because it comes dressed like overalls and work. Comes
Yeah.
dressed in overalls and looks like work, rather."
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
really sums it up.
Yeah, it's I think there's two real strategies to being happy and successful in life.
Mhm.
One is to find love in all the work that you're doing. The other is to only do work on the things that you love. But in the second scenario, you usually have to work very, very, very hard. The first scenario, oftentimes you don't have to work as hard because you're loving everything you do, which means you're more willing to do more things. In the second scenario, you're willing to do fewer things. In fact, you have a hard line, I will not do this, and I will do this, but I will do the things I will do endlessly hard. And those are typically, that's how I've found success. A lot of people that I meet, that's how they're finding success, is either they've honed in on one or two things and they work those things harder and get better at them than anyone else, or they really are able to do across the board everything and do it very well because they have an appreciation for work in general.
Yeah, I think it's Gary V that's always preaching, love the struggle, and the people that do everything really have to do that. They have to be able to take on 80% um, of the work. The Pareto
Yeah,
Principle, that 20% of the work yields 80% of the results, but they have to be willing to own that other 80% too.
exactly.
Whereas the second category you mentioned, the people who only will do certain things, they do those 20% tasks, and either the 80% rest of it doesn't get done, or they have somebody else do it.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, there's so many options today in terms of like how a person could build out a business from scratch. You could partner, you could outsource, you could do it all yourself, you could, get really good at one thing and leverage that. There's so many options. I think it's important for people to find one, what they're good at, like what they're naturally good at. You have to have a sense for your own talent.
Yes.
And if you don't have any sense, then ask people and hear what they're saying. And if a lot of people are saying like you're really good at one thing, try leaning into that. Um, but the other way is to just get really really focused on like something that you enjoy, that to you it doesn't make any sense why there'd be a benefit yet. I think this is a really interesting strategy. Not a lot of people do it purposefully, but everyone who does it by accident has a lot of success, which is why I want to say it to people to do on purpose. But something really obscure that only you like, or that very few people like but you really really love, developing whatever that is or whatever that turns into, because fascination, curiosity, and passion always turn into something when you fuel them with action. They turn
Yep.
into value of some sort. And a lot of times in business, you can't know the value that you're going to create. Like we have a plan for the value we're going to create, but along the way we find out that we actually are creating all these other opportunities we never planned out and we never could have thought of. And so a great way to do that is to just find what your passion is, find something that can fuel it. So there is going to always be sacrifice. There is always going to be that grind, that difficult part. Find what fuels you through difficult times. Whether it can be so many different things. Like for me, sometimes it's having a reward at the end. Like I could just set a really small reward, but something I really love. Like I'm not allowed to, I don't eat a lot of sweets, but I'm allowed to have a cupcake if I do that task that I really don't want to do, and that's really hard. And then I'll do it, like, because I love cupcakes. So I think doing things like that can be incredibly useful for overcoming the struggle periods.
I think you're absolutely right, and especially knowing which things work for you. Um, like I know some people, if they were to set that cupcake reward at the end, they they would get 85-90% of the way, and they would just fizzle out right before the finish line. And they will do that every time they try to set that reward. And there's a great book. It's called Drive by Daniel Pink. Have you heard of it?
I have not heard of that one yet. No.
It discusses some of the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations for millennials and moving in
Oh,
toward
cool.
Gen Z, and how in some of the research studies they compared the baby boomers generation, where you worked harder, you got more money, you did the career thing, and that progression was what fueled
Right.
people. And then they tried that with millennials and it failed miserably. And they're all over there scratching their heads like, what went wrong? How do we fix this? And then like Wikipedia blowing up and completely overtaking Microsoft's version, for example,
Yeah.
really embodies that intrinsic motivation for no perceptible reward. And
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that there's, right, when you're doing something that no one else is willing to do, there's something there. There's always going to be something there, because there's value to be found in almost everything. And people are just too smart to do things for extended periods of time and not get something out of that, not create something from that. I think at the core of most, I think like the core of human beings, like what connects us all, is that we have a extreme desire to create. I think that's like a lot of that's tied to like curiosity. Like curiosity kind of drives part of that need to create, but it's also a standalone thing. And when you spend time on something, you will create something. If you, especially if you're passionate about it and like care about it, because then you're tapping into all those subconscious parts of your brain, which is like 95% of your brain. And those start working in your favor, and you can't control it. You can't stop it. And it's a beautiful thing.
one thing that really resonates with me on that front, speaking of focusing your brain's direction and energies, is I've found that luck is more a matter of focus than of traditional luck. So the more I focus on
Yes.
something, the much better odds I have of succeeding at it, even if it's randomly generated, which is
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many unperceptible things to us that when you put them in motion, then they go. And so, like, some of those things are saying things out loud. When you say something out loud, it creates a different type of like synapse and connection in your brain that, again, that can grow and start doing other things. And now your brain is, you know, secretly working on this project for you, so to speak. And the same is true of, visualization. Like visualization can tap into a totally different part of your brain that can on its own be working in your favor. Or even more technology related or physical connection things like when you speak out loud, and like when I have a conversation with my husband about business and I'm like, oh, how cool would it be if like we started a company that, did this really amazing thing to help dogs out because I love dogs. I have 4 dogs. And then my phone is listening, of course. And then, whichever app I'm using, and I've actually had this happen several times, so I know this is true. But like, I'll go on LinkedIn, and in my suggested like connections or like what'll pop up, the people I see next are like very directly related to the thing I was just talking about. And
Yep.
that's awesome. Like I'm not scared that my phone's listening. I'm glad it's listening so it can be a better tool to serve me. Um, and so I think, being able to use technology is one of those things that millennials are, that's like part of their incentive loop, is not thinking I have to work harder, is just I have to understand technology better than other people. And inherently that requires work. Like you can't, very few people are talented enough to just like understand new things immediately. Most of us have to do some amount of work with learning. So I think that it's interesting to see and think about why millennials are easier to overcome it as a whole, that learning gap or that learning hurdle, so to speak, than older people, or just in general, why do older people not want to learn new technologies as much as younger people? That's something I've been thinking about. What do you think about that?
Well, I've had the pleasure of speaking with a lot of different kinds of people over the last 4.5, 4 years. And I've noticed that there are some among the older people, especially in like digital marketing, for example, that are open to and excited for new technology. But it
That's
seems
good.
like a lot of people are the neuroplasticity differences between someone who's 25 and someone who's 55 make a
Fair
big
enough.
difference in how quick they can learn the things. And sometimes that hits us in the ego, and we look and we say, okay, well, these young guns out here, I'm never going to be able to pick it up as quick as they can. There's no reason for me to try. And
Okay,
then,
no, that makes a lot of sense. So you're saying that because it's true that the And it's not true that all old people have less neuroplasticity. It's just most of them, because you retain neuroplasticity as you're learning new things. Um,
Exactly.
and so you're just like in the beginning of our life, we're learning new things all the time. And as we move away from that, like childhood period, and even in our early adult years, we're still learning a lot of new things. But you get into your 40s and like you don't have to learn new things. Like you can choose to, but you don't have to. You've pretty much learned everything that you could possibly need to know to survive and maintain, a life at where you've achieved it. And so that is why people are having the hard time learning something new, is because it's been a long time since they've learned something new. That makes a lot of
Precisely.
sense. Very
Precisely. Because a
insightful.
lot of people in the baby boomer generation, they started out as an intern, they finish up as a senior executive. They've been that
Right.
senior executive for the last 5 or 10 years. They haven't had to learn a lot of new things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my perspective on it.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're struggling right now with all the technology, really the answer is to just spend a, concentrated amount of time, like however much you can concentrate it.
Yep.
It could be a week of super concentrated, it could be a month, 3 months, but like learn technology and put yourself through the struggle of like trying to get it. And then once you get past that first hump, it'll all be so much easier for you versus having to struggle a little bit for the rest of your life. Because really
Exactly.
that's how technology works. Once you dive into it and you immerse yourself and you get over that initial learning hurdle, the rest of it picks up much faster and much faster.
That's exactly right. And a lot of technology, fortunately, tends to be built in kind of a building blocks structure. So
Hmm.
once you acquire that certain level of proficiency, each of the next steps past that first pickup. So
Yeah,
if here's where the technology started and here's where it is now, you have to get all the way up to here to
yeah.
really gain that now base level of understanding, and then all the steps from there are just little baby steps.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's really how it is with even just the internet or social media or digital marketing, any of these things. There's so much data and there's so much like history to the information that actually is really helpful to understanding how it all works.
Yep.
So, understanding where marketing came from or like what it used to look like really, really can help people understand what's happening today, because there's just so many components where if you don't know a lot about digital marketing and you're just hopping right into it, it's overwhelming. I mean, just with social media alone, there's like a bajillion platforms. There's like 10 that we've all heard of to choose from, and then there's
Yep.
hundreds more smaller ones that, and when I say smaller, that means they have only 10 million users or 20 million users or several hundred thousand, which is still a huge database of people for you to interact with and potentially market to that social media, to like, again, all the different click funnels and landing pages and types of marketing you can do through links and through banners or email marketing or cross promotion and affiliate stuff in JV. So it's confusing if you don't start out with like, how did it used to work when it was really simple? Because when you can understand, okay, that makes sense, then like you said, it's literally, then you can go, okay, what happened next? Next is one thing was added. It wasn't everything at once. It was like, okay, first, emails were just email, and then like you could click a link in an email. Like, like all these little things happen. And once you learn and start to understand the history of it, you also start to understand the psychology of how it evolved, which
Yep.
really helps you tap into what's happening right now and being able
Yeah.
to use it well.
That's exactly right. At the end of the day, part of how humanity survived is our brain is great at pattern recognition. And as you learn some of the basic stuff, like if we go back to the early days of SEO and
Yes,
what's now
SEO.
black hat practices of keyword stuffing was what you had to do to survive at the time. Now you fast forward and you still use keywords now because those are a great
Yeah,
base, but you don't throw in hundreds of them into a blog post anymore because that
yeah.
ruins the experience of it. And now we focus more on the experiential value of the content.
Yeah, which is the thing that I get really excited about technology, and that's like exactly what happened in this case, is that the technology has finally caught up with how we actually want to experience things. So it used to be you could stuff the keywords because the technology, like the crawl bots or spider bots,
Yeah.
I don't know what they're called, couldn't really recognize that that was bad content. Now it can recognize, like, you use the same word a bunch of times in a row in this thing, this is not good, well written content. So it's like not going to get the, you know, the rating or however it works in the algorithm to pop up in Google.
Right.
And the same thing's happening with all the levels of technology. Like, it used to be basic, and because it was basic, people could take advantage of certain parts of it. Now it's much more nuanced and complex. It's much harder to take advantage of the technology to like do something sketchy with it, because the technology will always be designed in the user's favor. That's how technology sells, is that people have to like it. It has to do something for them. And therefore, it can't sneakily be hurting people, because as soon as they recognized it was doing something bad for them, they'd stop using it and the technology would die. So
Exactly.
technology has to be designed to benefit people. It can't secretly be designed to take advantage of you, because people will always be smarter than technology and will always notice. And that's when it'll be the end of that company.
Um, we've got some interesting developments on the horizon with artificial intelligence and machine learning that are really helping advance technology in positive ways.
Yes,
Um,
I agree. Especially in the mental health space, which I think is really
yeah,
cool. Like some cool facial recognition stuff going on there.
that's really interesting. I'll have to do a little bit of a deep dive there myself and kind of
Yeah,
see
I
what I
don't
can
know a
find.
lot about it, but it's, you know, all centered around micro expressions. And
Okay,
the fact that a lot of times we're unaware of how we feel to at least some degree, right? We might be tense in
interesting.
a way where we're distracting ourselves with our work or whatever, and little micro, you know, aggressions are coming out, or little micro negativities are coming out that build on themselves.
Yep.
But if you had your phone, because you have like an app in the background that you've given the ability to watch your face, and every time you start to micro express those things, it popped up a video, either immediately like changing how you were thinking, or just to make you even aware of like, hey, this is letting you know that like you're feeling a little bit like aggressive or upset or sad right now. Here's, you know, 3 tips of things you could do to feel a little better. Or hopefully now that you're aware, you know, you can change, because a lot of times it's just, once you're aware, you're like, oh, I don't want to feel angry, like I have something else I could choose to focus on and feel happy about. So there's all different levels of being able to adapt and use information, but I think that just getting the information about ourselves and how we're feeling could be incredible for a lot of people.
Gaining that insight, I
Yeah.
100% agree, can be really, really valuable. And there could be something for, like you talked about, having the cognitive behavioral therapy or other methods of treatment, you know, something to immediately just snap your brain into a different gear
Yeah.
that could be beneficial for a lot of people there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, it could be adapted and niche down for specific audiences. Like, could be crafted. A program could be specifically designed around like veterans.
Yep.
You know, a program could be specifically designed for kids who are getting bullied in school. Like,
Yep.
I think that there's a lot of really, really smart like psychologists and therapists who have gone to a lot of schooling, who have read a lot of studies, who, as they're coming together through the connection of social media, and starting to work more and more together, are going to be developing some like really groundbreaking things.
I think you're exactly right. If you had to pick one statistic from your decade long career in digital marketing and all of the other experiences you've had over the last few years, what would it be?
It would probably be a statistic I don't have an exact number for, but I have had more than 10 people message me with a type of message that was of the caliber that I either helped save their life or helped them through like a significantly traumatic experience. To me, that's like why I want to grow a large business, is so I can impact more people in the deepest way possible. And I want to help the people who need the most help which are the ones who are, I think, really, really deeply hurting, or like a lot of the people that society in general, even still social media, are like, those are negative people, so they don't deserve our kind of empathy or love or attention. I think those are the people who need our empathy, love, and attention the most. And it's hard, and it like sucks to be nice to someone and they're shitty back to you, but like that's what works and that's what wins. And at the end of the day, when you break through, it's worth everything that you went through, and it's honestly amplified, the good feelings amplified by everything that you had to go through to get there.
Yeah, there's a lot to be gained through the depth of a relationship that comes from a shared struggle or a common struggle,
Yeah.
and I think I think that is absolutely wonderful. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Um, yeah, just the only thing is like, don't get too distracted by all the noise. There's so much noise in the world today. It's really, really important to listen to your own voice. And I think the best way to do that, so your voice in your head literally works the same way your focus does, where if you don't give it enough time to speak, it becomes quieter and quieter, or maybe quieter is not the right way to describe it, but it becomes harder for you to notice that it's even speaking. Like it might be speaking, but all of a sudden you're not paying attention to it anymore. And the best way to redevelop that or develop it from scratch is to spend time absolutely alone with zero distractions, like in a zero space where you would think that's boring. It's like, yeah, but like let your brain think, let it start turning its wheels. There will be either a voice or some people don't think in voice, some people think in visual. So you'll either start hearing that voice or you'll start visualizing in your head much more strongly as you stop focusing on all the distractions that exist. And I think that's one of the best ways for anyone to succeed at anything they're doing, is just to develop that connection with their own inner voice, because that voice is controlled by the subconscious of your brain. And again, that subconscious is like 95% of your brain power. And so once you start listening to that, it's going to start telling you or suggesting or giving you intuition into things that you never were had enough connection with to realize that you were intuitive about or thinking about or had good insights about. So you're not creative, you're not unintelligent, you're just not connected to the intelligent part of your brain. You're not connected to the creative part of your brain. And that's something you can develop through isolation.
I couldn't agree more. Like you mentioned, being able to really home in on that is it's powerful. It does require you to spend time alone, and that's something that a lot of people try to skip nowadays.
Yeah.
Is doing the self discovery involved.